Okay, so you want to own a tattoo studio. You've got the vision. You find a cool industrial space in a neighborhood that's starting to gentrify. You slap some neon on the wall, you hire a couple of artists, and you watch people walk in and hand you cash for something that costs you almost nothing in materials. Ink, needles, a machine that hums. That's it. You are essentially selling human skin real estate. And unlike a restaurant, nobody sends the product back to the kitchen. The work goes home on the customer. You don't have spoilage. You don't have inventory rotting in a walk-in freezer. You do the art, you collect the money, you repeat. It sounds like one of the cleanest, most recession-proof businesses a person could build. Here's the problem. Almost none of that is how this business actually works. Because what looks like an art business from the outside is actually three completely different businesses stacked on top of each other, and most people who open a tattoo studio only understand one of them. You walk into the space on your first day as an owner. The chairs are new, the flash art is framed on the walls, the autoclave is plugged in, and you feel genuinely good about yourself. This is real. This is yours. And then about 6 weeks in, you start doing the math in your head while you're lying in bed at night, staring at the ceiling. Because the math doesn't quite add up the way you thought it would when you were writing the business plan at your kitchen table. Let's start with what you actually pay before a single person sits in your chair. Your lease in a decent neighborhood, not Manhattan, not Beverly Hills, just a city with foot traffic and a demographic that gets tattoos, that's going to run you somewhere between $3,000 and $6,000 a month. You've got your liability insurance. Because the moment you're putting needles into people's bodies, you need serious coverage, and that's going to run you another $2,000 to $4,000 a year at minimum. You need your bloodborne pathogen compliance setup, your sharps disposal contracts, your sterilization equipment. That autoclave you felt good about buying? A decent one costs $1,200. The biohazard pickup service is a recurring monthly cost. Your licensing fees vary by state, but in most places you're paying per artist, per station, and per facility. You are not a food truck. The regulatory overhead is real and it compounds. Now add your consumables. Needles are single-use by law and by basic human decency. Ink costs more than people think, especially if you're running a shop that does high-quality color work. Gloves, barriers, disposable supplies, ink caps, the stuff that makes a single session actually happen. You're looking at somewhere between $15 and $30 in consumables per appointment, depending on the complexity and duration of the work. On a $200 tattoo, that's not devastating. On a $75 walk-in special you ran on social media to drive foot traffic, you are now in territory where you need to think very carefully about what that session actually cost you. And then there's the employee question, which is where most new studio owners walk straight into a wall they did not see coming. The traditional tattoo industry does not run on employment. It runs on booth rental. You, the shop owner, provide the space, the utilities, the equipment, the reputation, the walk-in traffic, the booking system, the front desk, and the Wi-Fi. The artist provides their hands, their kit, their clients, and their talent. In exchange, the artist pays you a weekly or monthly booth rent, and everything they earn beyond that is theirs. In a well-run shop in a mid-sized city, booth rent might be $200 to $500 a week per artist. You have 4 chairs, you collect booth rent from 4 artists, and in your head that math is beautiful. $2,000 a week in guaranteed income before you do a single thing. Here's what actually happens. One of your artists is a booking machine, fully booked 6 weeks out. Clients fly in from other states. She's your brand. She is also the most negotiable person in your building because she knows exactly what she brings to your shop, and she has 3 other shop owners texting her. The moment you raise her booth rent, she walks, and she takes her 5,000 Instagram followers and her 6-week waitlist with her. Another one of your artists is still building their clientele. They're talented but new, and they're maybe doing 3 appointments a week. Their booth rent is the same $200, but some weeks they're barely covering it. On the weeks they don't cover it, they're paying you out of savings, which means they're one rough month away from giving notice. Your third artist just went to a convention for 2 weeks, and your fourth called in sick 4 days in a row. Your booth rent model has just delivered you somewhere around 60% of its theoretical maximum income for the month. This is the first place where the business starts to feel different from the plan. Because booth rent sounds like passive income, and in the best case, it sort of is, but what it actually is a collection of small freelance businesses operating under your roof, each with their own volatility, their own client base, their own schedule, and their own career trajectory that may or may not align with yours. Some shops go the other direction and hire artists as employees on a commission split. You take 40% of every tattoo, the artist takes 60. Now you have more control. You can enforce hours, set standards, build a consistent brand, and train people the way you want them trained. You also now have payroll taxes, workers' compensation, unemployment insurance, scheduling obligations, and a much more complex relationship with your revenue. Your 60% payout is before those costs. After payroll taxes and compliance, you're keeping somewhere closer to 25 to 30 cents on every dollar that comes through your door. And if an artist has a slow week, that's your problem now, not theirs. Neither model is wrong. But neither model is the passive, clean, art business dream you had in month one. The second business inside your tattoo studio is the one almost nobody talks about when they're romanticizing the industry. And it's the one that will either save you or destroy you. The walk-in business versus the appointment business, and the fundamental tension between them. Your appointment clients are your revenue spine. These are the people booking sleeves, back pieces, full-color portraits, projects that take multiple sessions and run into thousands of dollars. A solid tattoo artist doing 5 appointments a week at an average of $300 per session generates $1,500 a week in gross revenue from their chair. That's predictable. That's plannable. That's what lets you build a real business with real cash flow projections. Appointment clients also tend to refer other appointment clients. They post the work on Instagram, they tag the shop, they're walking billboards for the level of artistry you have in the building. Walk-in clients are something else entirely. The person who wanders in off the street on a Saturday afternoon and wants a small design on their ankle is not bad business, but they are chaotic business. They often want something fast. They often have a budget in mind that they haven't told you, and they often want changes mid-consultation that eat time. A walk-in that pays $75 for a 30-minute piece is earning your artist the equivalent of $150 an hour. Which actually sounds great until you realize the consultation took 20 minutes, the stencil took 15 minutes, and there were 2 revisions before they even sat down. Your artist just spent an hour and 15 minutes to generate a transaction that nets the shop maybe $30 after consumables and commission. Walk-ins serve a purpose. They fill the gaps in the schedule. They introduce people to your shop who might become long-term clients. They keep the floor busy on slow Tuesdays. But you cannot build a financially stable tattoo studio primarily on walk-in traffic, and the shops that try to chase walk-in volume by racing to the bottom on price end up doing more work, making less money, and burning out their best artists, who did not spend years mastering their craft to crank out $50 flash all day. The shops that understand this start treating their walk-in clientele like the top of a funnel. You give them a good experience, you do solid work at a fair price, and you capture their information. Then you invite them back for something bigger. The walk-in becomes the appointment. The appointment becomes the project. The project becomes the client who has been coming to your shop for 8 years and has 3 artists work on their body and sends their friends in for consultations. That is the conversion that matters. That is the economic engine underneath the art business. The third business inside your tattoo studio is the one that separates the owners who build real wealth from the ones who keep showing up 7 days a week until they physically can't anymore, the brand. Most tattoo studio owners think about their brand as their logo and their Instagram aesthetic. Clean grid, moody photos, the kind of content that makes other tattoo people hit the follow button. That's not nothing. But brand in the economic sense is something more specific and more valuable. It's the reason a client chooses your shop over the 4 other shops within a mile of you. It's the reason an artist wants to be associated with your space even if you're not paying them more than the shop down the street. It's the reason you can charge $400 for a consultation deposit when your competitor across town does walk-ins for free. The shops that have cracked brand building in this industry have figured out something that most service businesses eventually have to confront. You are not selling a tattoo. You are selling an experience with a tattoo attached to it. The moment a client books a consultation, the experience has begun. The way your front desk responds to the inquiry, the waiting area, the music, the conversation, the way the artist explains their process, the aftercare instructions, the follow-up. All of it is the product. The tattoo is the physical artifact you leave people with, but the thing they tell their friends about is the experience of getting it. Shops that have operationalized this charge more, retain their artists longer, get more repeat business, and have a much easier time surviving the inevitable slow periods in the calendar. Because there are slow periods. January and February, people are broke from the holidays and not thinking about their bodies. Summer, depending on your market, can also dip because people are busy and traveling. You will have months where your projected revenue and your actual revenue are in very different zip codes. The shops that survive those gaps are the ones with a loyal client base that books months in advance, not the ones chasing whoever walks through the door that day. Now let's talk about what this business actually costs to start, because the number that gets thrown around in casual conversations about opening a tattoo studio is almost always wrong. People hear small business, and they think $30,000, maybe 50. The truth, for a legitimate, licensed, properly equipped studio in a real commercial space, is closer to $80,000 to $150,000 when you account for everything. Your build-out and lease deposit alone can run you $20,000 to $40,000 depending on the condition of the space and your local market. Your equipment, chairs, stations, lighting, autoclave, the infrastructure that makes the shop functional is another $15,000 to $30,000. Your signage, your initial marketing, your website, your booking software, your point-of-sale system, your legal and licensing fees, your first few months of operating costs before the revenue stabilizes. All of it layers on top of that base number. And here's the part that trips up a lot of first-time studio owners who were previously working as artists. You need operating capital as a buffer, because the first 6 months of a new shop are almost never profitable. Not because the business is bad, because the business is new. You're building clientele, you're building reputation, you're figuring out which of your marketing channels actually drives bookings versus which ones just drive followers. Most businesses take 12 to 18 months to hit consistent profitability, and the ones that don't make it usually don't fail because the concept was bad. They fail because the owner ran out of runway before the revenue caught up. When a tattoo studio does hit its stride financially, the numbers can actually look quite good. A 4-chair studio in a mid-sized city, fully booked, with a healthy mix of appointment work and some walk-in volume, can generate somewhere between $300,000 and $600,000 in annual gross revenue. After all costs, including rent, supplies, staffing or booth rent splits, insurance, software, marketing, and the miscellaneous chaos that is running any small business, your net margin as the owner might land between 15% and 25% in a well-run operation. On $500,000 in gross revenue, that's $75,000 to $125,000 in profit. That's genuinely solid for a small business. The problem is that $300,000 to $600,000 range is not where most studios land. Most studios are doing somewhere between $150,000 and $250,000 in annual revenue, especially in their first 3 years. And at that scale, after all costs, the owner is often making less money than one of their senior artists. You are working harder, taking on more risk, managing more complexity, and clearing maybe $60,000 a year, which might be fine depending on what you came from and what you're building toward. But you need to know that number before you sign the lease. The tattoo industry also has a specific economic vulnerability that most other businesses don't deal with to the same degree. It is entirely talent dependent in a way that is genuinely difficult to hedge. A restaurant can lose a chef and train a new one. A retail store can replace a salesperson. When you lose your best tattoo artist, especially in a small shop, you can lose a significant portion of your revenue almost overnight. And because the talent owns the relationship with the client, not you, when the artist leaves, the clients often follow. You have no contractual mechanism to prevent this in most jurisdictions, and even where non-solicitation clauses exist for tattoo artists, they are notoriously difficult to enforce because the client relationship is deeply personal and built entirely on trust in the individual, not the brand. The way serious studio owners protect against this is by doing 2 things simultaneously. They build the shop brand so strong that clients develop loyalty to the space, not just the individual, and they diversify the artist roster so that no single person represents more than 30% of the shop's revenue. Both of those things are harder to do than they sound. Building shop brand over artist brand requires marketing investment, reputation management, a consistent client experience, and sometimes the uncomfortable conversation with your best artist about whose name is on the Instagram bio. Diversifying the roster requires constantly developing new talent, which means bringing in less established artists, which means shorter wait lists and potentially lower average ticket prices while that artist builds their book. There's no clean solution. It's just ongoing, active management of risk. The pricing question in this business is also more complicated than it looks from outside, because you're operating in a market where the price sensitivity of the customer depends almost entirely on the perceived value of the artist. The same tattoo, the same size, the same placement can genuinely be priced at $200 or $1,200 depending on who is doing it and what their reputation is. A well-known artist in a major city with a strong social following can set a minimum price of $500 and turn away more clients than they can take. A newer artist in the same shop doing technically solid work might struggle to hold a $200 minimum. Those two people sit 4 feet apart from each other all day, and their economics are radically different. This creates an internal pricing tension that every multi-artist shop has to navigate. If you enforce a shop-wide minimum to protect your brand positioning, you might price out the clientele that a developing artist needs to build their portfolio and their book. If you let every artist set their own prices, you end up with a confusing tiered structure that can feel arbitrary to customers and creates internal dynamics among your artists about whose work is valued more. Most shops land somewhere in the middle, with a shop minimum that's on the lower end of the market, but with individual artists able to charge beyond that, based on their profile and demand. There's a moment that happens in almost every tattoo studio around the 2 to 3 year mark, and it's the moment that determines whether the owner has actually built a business or just built a really stressful job. That moment is when the owner has to decide whether to be an artist who owns a studio or a business owner who happens to run an art-based business. Those are not the same thing, and the skills required are almost completely different. Being an exceptional tattoo artist gets you to the point of opening the studio, but running it, managing people, managing cash flow, making marketing decisions, negotiating leases, handling the compliance and legal complexity, doing the things that keep the lights on when 3 artists have slow months, simultaneously. That requires a completely different set of competencies. The owners who try to do both at full capacity, tattooing 40 hours a week and managing the business at the same time, almost always end up doing both badly after a certain point. Not because they lack talent or work ethic, because there are only so many hours and so much cognitive bandwidth available in a day, and splitting your focus between 2 fundamentally different jobs means neither one gets your best. The ones who build real businesses eventually transition out of the chair, or at least substantially reduce their chair time, and start treating the studio as the product instead of their tattooing as the product. That transition is emotionally difficult for a lot of artist owners. The craft is often why they open the studio in the first place. Walking away from it, even partially, feels like losing something essential. But the economics of the thing usually make the argument on their own eventually. The market you choose matters enormously, and in ways that aren't obvious before you open. You might think a high-density urban market is automatically better because there are more people. But a high-density urban market also means higher rent, more competition, higher cost of living for your artists, which means they need to charge more to survive, which pushes your minimum prices up, which narrows your accessible clientele. A mid-sized city with a strong arts culture, a university presence, and a growing young professional demographic can be a genuinely better market for a tattoo studio than a major metro because your costs are lower, your competition is less consolidated, and the client base has both the income and the cultural appetite for quality work. The best studio owners also think about their market in terms of what type of tattooing it will actually support long-term. A studio built around fine-line minimalist work might kill it in a neighborhood full of young creative professionals, but struggle in a blue-collar suburb. A traditional American or Japanese shop might have a fiercely loyal niche clientele, but won't cross over to the clients who want the soft, painterly style that's all over Instagram right now. Style positioning is a marketing decision that has direct revenue consequences, and it shapes every hiring decision you make after it. There is one more revenue stream in this business that most new owners underestimate and that can meaningfully change the economics of the whole operation: merchandise and retail. High-end tattoo studios have started building real income from branded merchandise, from selling high-quality aftercare products, from flash print sales, from collaborations with other artists. A shop that builds a genuinely strong brand can sell $500 printed flash sets, $75 t-shirts, and $25 aftercare kits to people who may never even sit in the chair. It's a small piece of the revenue picture, but it's high margin, it builds community, and it extends the brand into the world in ways that pure service revenue can't. Think of it as the thing that turns a client into a fan. What you're actually building when you build a tattoo studio, if you build it correctly, is a reputation business that happens to have a service attached to it. Every piece of work that leaves your shop is a permanent advertisement for your brand on someone's body. Every artist you develop and train, and then watch succeed, builds your reputation as a place where careers grow. Every client who has an exceptional experience and tells 3 friends builds your book for free. The compounding effect of reputation in this industry is real, and it runs in both directions. One genuinely bad experience that goes viral on social media can damage a studio for years. A consistent record of excellent work, treated clients, and respected artists builds something that is extremely difficult to replicate from scratch. The tattoo industry is currently in an interesting economic moment. The stigma around tattoos has essentially collapsed in the last 20 years. The demographic of tattooed Americans now spans age groups, income levels, and professional categories that the industry didn't reach a generation ago. It's a $35 billion global industry, and it has been growing consistently for decades. The macro tailwinds are real, but the individual studio economics are still hard because the growth of the market has also brought in more competition, more supply of artists trained through the explosion of tattoo programs and apprenticeships, and more client sophistication about pricing and quality. Getting into the market now requires more differentiation, more intentionality about positioning, and more business discipline than it did 15 years ago when there were simply fewer shops and fewer artists. The dream you walked in with, the cool space, the humming machines, the creative business that pays you to be around art all day, that dream is not wrong, it's achievable. But the path to it runs straight through a series of decisions that have nothing to do with art and everything to do with cash flow management, talent retention, brand building, and the kind of operational discipline that nobody romanticizes, but everybody who builds a lasting business eventually respects. The studios that survive their first 5 years aren't necessarily the ones with the best artists. They're the ones where the owner understood that they were running 3 businesses simultaneously and built the systems to manage all 3 at once. They're the ones who knew their numbers, not just their bookings. They're the ones who treated their artists like partners in something rather than interchangeable seat fillers. And they're the ones who understood, early, that the tattoo on a client's skin is the last step in a much longer economic story, not the only one. The ink doesn't make the business. The infrastructure around the ink does. And the sooner you understand that, the sooner you stop being an artist who owns a studio and start being someone who's actually built something worth owning. If this kind of deep dive into the real economics of businesses that look simple from the outside is what you're here for, hit subscribe and stay in it with us. There's a lot more to dig into.